Hello, welcome to the show. My name is Jayne Lawrence. I'm an artist who lives and works in San Antonio, Texas, and I've been here for about 30 plus years. I got both my MFA and BFA at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and I taught there for 20 years, teaching drawing, sculpture. I taught ceramics at SAC for a while, and I met my business partner in 1993. I was looking for a studio, and I liked this artwork I saw hanging on the wall, and I wanted to know who did it. So I met this woman, and we ended up opening up an alternative gallery down in the Blue Star, which we ran for 20 years. It was Cactus Bra. We ended in about 2013, I think. Gentrification had happened, Blue Star was changing, and we could no longer afford it. It wasn't easy to do anymore. So we stopped, and we were thinking about really working on our own careers at that point. But we missed it. And just recently, I think about a year ago, we built a building in my friend's backyard, and we reopened it as Cactus Barn. So we are now back at it as gallery owners. I think you might be interested to know where some of my inspirations come from. I have looked at surrealist artists. I'm interested in Remigio Vargo because of the fantastical kind of narrative that they imply. The thing that is based in reality, but somehow moves into dreams. I've looked at women from the early 17 and 1800s, like Marianne North or Maria Sibylla Marin. I've looked at Darwin, people who go out beyond the norm to investigate and discover things and share it with us. Those things influence my work. I'm a narrative artist. I work on developing some kind of story that you step into. When you step into my story, I'm not giving you a conclusion or telling you how to think. I'm just giving you clues that direct you along a path, and you're to implement your own feelings, expressions, experiences into those narratives and see what you come out with. Hopefully you're mesmerized by my technical expertise and the choices that I make. I hope to always have some kind of glitch in the piece, something that doesn't quite fit, that seems to be just a little bit disturbing, so that you're put a little bit off kilter. I think that change is inevitable. There's certain truths. I think you'll all agree to that things happen and they're cyclical. But as much as we would like things to stay in place, they never do. So my work is about that change and working into how does that affect us as individuals. I've worked as themes as far as I think I started out working with personal identity, looking at how children develop the paradigms that they have as they grow up. So I looked at Grimm's fairy tales, and I created clothing that would take the narrative and flip it a little bit, change it. You'll see some screen suits in the show. So that was kind of a take on the Emperor's New Clothes. So the screen suits, when worn, are to give the wearer the impression that they can be exactly what the interviewer or the person wants them to see. So kind of the play that on reality and like the king who's wearing the clothes that the thread maker made, he's naked. He really isn't wearing the clothes that he thinks he is, but it's that empowerment of the impression that he goes about town. From the clothing series, I worked on a father's series, and I think that was a transitional piece, moving away from undergraduate school or graduate school into kind of the next phase of my development. And the Father series was looking at the idea of who was a father. Whether you had a father in your life or you didn't, were there certain phrases or things that reminded you of that absence or of having a father in your life? So I did a whole series on that. But as I was doing that series, what the transition was to move from a more personal aspect or identity, like from the child into the adult, into the more of the community. So I was looking for a way to talk about all of us, not just the individual, but us as a collective. And so I think that was a huge transition piece. Other series I've done is I went to Utica, New York, and I started the Arcane, or the Archetype series. The Archetype series was banana people. They were all female. I call them banana people. You can see behind me, this one right here. Their tails swing forward or back depending on their attitude or their mood. They're all female. But when her tail moves forward, she seems to have this large phallus, and so it becomes somewhat threatening when we mix that gender identity or the role. And that's another thing I've covered in my work, is that idea of what does society, or how are those roles imposed on us, and what reinforces those roles, and how do we deal with those roles. So the Archetype series, they I don't know how far into the series, I used to call them banana people. I don't know how far into the series I started thinking about them as archetypes, but once I started developing them, I really thought they're individuals. Like, this is the huntress. Each one is empowered with particular qualities that I think help the individual move forward in life or take on challenges. We wear different hats, and as we, if I'm a teacher, I'm wearing the teacher hat. If I'm at a party, I'm wearing my party hat. If I'm attending a funeral, I'm much more staid in how I behave. So each situation that we come to, we behave in a different manner, I think. We change a little bit. So what are those parts of our personality that allow us to handle those situations or navigate those? So I think we have a group of archetypes that we use and put together, and that becomes us. During the Archetype series, I began the Carousel of the Arcane, which again moved back to stories. My work from 30 years ago, I think, is as important as it is today. I think it's changed and it's evolved, but I can take something that I did 20 years ago and put it with pieces that I have just done recently, and somehow they all work together. By living in a studio like this, and you can see pieces around me, different paintings and drawings and sculptures, you find that there becomes a relationship to the pieces that maybe you don't see when you're creating a drawing. You're not relating it to the sculpture, or you're not relating it to a painting you're doing. But when you put everything together, suddenly you see this cross kind of pollination that happens. And I think that's why my work stays very current, that something from 20 years ago relates to something that I'm doing today, because I have that cross-pollination within the studio. And I'm constantly looking at what I did, how I feel about it, how it's changed. Go back to that thing that everything is cyclical. How is it different today than it was 20 years ago? How are we navigating the world today than we did 10 years ago? How did COVID affect us? What changes have we made? So all those things come into the work. So the Arcane series is a series about the outsider. How does the outsider fit? If the outsider, the person who in a story does something that they're not supposed to, is the anti-hero and they become the hero of the story, how does that change? And how do we as a society fit the other in? So a lot of my work today is moving from, again, the individual to the community, looking at how we fit in, looking at identity, looking at that sense of place, and that's my work. I think the thing that people are interested about my work is that I'm a mixed media artist. And because I'm a mixed media artist, it means I can move from sculpture to drawing. I question whether or not I can move into painting. I'm still debating that. Some people say yes, I'm not so sure. Color's a bitch. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Anyway, when I am looking at an idea, and I was talking to you a little bit about how living with the artwork, when you have everything around you and it is informing you as you're working, you're also looking at different aspects of that work. You're looking at a drawing, you're looking at a sculpture. Maybe the idea of being a mixed media artist is because it took me forever to graduate from school. So I had so much schooling. I was doing ceramics, I was doing sculpture, I was doing painting, I was doing drawing. And when you do it all and you do it for so long, it's really hard to break those habits. You just dabble in everything. It's not that I get bored easily and need to move to a new media. I think it's the idea calls for it. So when I have an idea, the idea is either it's in my head, it's intellectual, or it's in my heart. And if it's in my heart, it's more sculptural, so it needs to be more physical. Sometimes if I'm trying to figure something out, I have to make it. I have to use my hands to figure out what it needs to be. And sometimes in that making, I'm realizing that the piece needs to be out of other material than what I'm working with. And I think that's something that all happens through a process. I can't give you a recipe that says, oh, well, why is this series drawing and why is this series sculpture and how do they come together? They come together in an installation. I can tell you that, but that comes by living with the artwork. The other thing that comes in materials, I think, is when you look at other artists and you influence them. Julia Heffernan I saw a work of hers in New York, and she does these paintings, and they're Baroque, they're fabulous dresses around these individuals, and they're made of deers and flowers, and she incorporates a lot of my ideas into her work, but she does it in such a different way, but it has such a romantic, tactile feeling that it pulls you into that work, and that influences me. Cornelia Hess Honinger was doing work with the insects and the mutations that were happening right after Chernobyl. And I saw a book of hers and was fascinated by the watercolors that she did of these insects. And I thought, oh, if I could do that, that would be all I would want to do. But I think I was interested in the architecture of her drawings and the patterns and the systems that I was seeing in both those artists. I thought, that's what my work is. I create these systems, or I examine the systems and how they work, whether they be social systems, whether they be systems on how we identify, whether they be systems on how we operate. I thought that was interesting, so they play into my work, and looking at those systems, I think also plays in how I pick that materiality. And I think taking from those artists, it's that specificity to detail, that textural kind of sensibility, that beauty that is apparently a bad word in the art world right now, but it is that beauty, that fascination that we pull into it that I want to portray in my work and want you to experience.